عدي عدي.
We will be coming back to Luxor, but this afternoon we will board a boat for a 4-day cruise on the Nile. Tonight we will sleep at Edfu, and tomorrow morning we'll visit the temple of Horus. In the meantime, we will discover the Nile Valley and all the life that has been organised on this long green cordon that winds through the middle of the desert. Let's go. We will go up the second largest river in the world, which stretches over 6,700 kilometers between Rwanda and the Mediterranean. No, these men are not pirates attacking the boat, but just peaceful souvenir salesmen using a pretty original sales technique. They throw the tablecloth or djellaba onto the boat while negotiating the price. Either they have a buyer or they recuperate the merchandise. It's late afternoon when we arrive at the Esna Lock. It takes about an hour to go through it, but we'll have some entertainment.
Price? You know what's cost? Hello, you Dutch? Dutch? From Dutch? Hello? 1 tower? Towers? Hello?
How much?
Neighbor class. Excuse me. Okay with napkin.
No.
No, this was napkin. Ask this your problem, my friend. Wait!
It's 7 AM in Edfu on the east side of the Nile, and a horse-drawn carriage is waiting to take us to the temple of Horus. The origins of the city go back to the distant past, the 6th dynasty of ancient Egypt. During the Ptolemaic era, it was renamed Apollinopolis Magna in honor of the god Apollo. The Greeks, who dominated Egypt over a century, saw in Horus the image of their sun god. In Egyptian mythology, Horus is the son of Isis and Osiris, winner of the fight against Set, the symbol of evil and the murder of his father. He is considered as the ancestor of all the pharaohs. When the Romans came to power, Apollinopolis Magna and the Temple of Horus were preserved from any degradation. Rare in Egypt, the texts describe with precision the foundation date, the 7th epiphy of the 10th year of Ptolemy III, the 23rd of August, 237 BC. It was inaugurated by Ptolemy XII, the father of the great Cleopatra, 180 years later. By its size, it is one of the most imposing places of worship in the Nile Valley. 80 meters wide and 137 meters long. It is also one of the best preserved in Egypt. The temple was a place of worship until 391 AD, when the Roman Emperor Theodosius I banned paganism throughout the Roman Empire. The temple then became progressively covered in desert sand and silt from the Nile. It was not until 1798 that a French expedition rediscovered the top of its immense pylon. And then it was not until 1860 that the French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette began to clear the sand. The Temple of Horus then emerged from the depths of the earth, miraculously preserved from the ravages of time. The temple is enclosed by 2 outer walls. The first, in mud brick, included the ancillary buildings: Mamizi, Nilometer, Sacred Lake, warehouses and priest dwellings. The second wall, in sandstone, surrounded the temple, leaving only a narrow passage. The entrance pylon is 36 meters high and 79 meters wide. Giant reliefs decorate the different sides. On the top of the outside wall, the king makes offerings to the gods. The depiction of Horus and Tot is faithful to that of ancient Egypt, but the roundness of the breasts of the goddess Mat certainly dates the temple from the Greco-Roman period. Below, Ptolemy XII massacres the captives, pulling them by the hair, in front of Horus and Hathor. Horus of Behatet and Hathor of Dendera form a divine couple and are omnipresent in this temple. the other side of the pylon is represented the sacred marriage between Horus and Hathor. It is the celebration of the beautiful feast of Behedet, which took place every year in August. It can also be seen in detail on the walls of a large courtyard. An imposing flotilla of boats and sailboats departed from the temple of Hathor in Dendera, accompanying the statue of the goddess to the temple of Edfu. The people then crowded into the temple for 15 days of religious ceremonies and celebrations. Hathor then returned to Dendera. Before entering the temple, we greet Horus, who does not seem happy to see us. He is also depicted above the entrance as a winged sun disk with two uraeus. The architecture of the temple reproduces the building traditions of the earlier pharaonic eras. We pass the pylon and enter the large paved courtyard, bordered by two porticos with composite capitals. The complexity of the Greco-Roman capitals symbolizes the abundance of the creation. Texts and reliefs cover almost all of the walls and the 32 columns. Empty cartouches means that the temple is a place of worship erected for royal office, regardless of the reigning or future king. Many characters were hammered by the first Copts, the Christians of Egypt, who wanted to see the idols of the pagan religion disappear. I realised that I forgot to tell you that the two towers of the pylon are hollow. An internal staircase leads to a terrace where the astronomer priests observe the stars. It is time to enter the pronaos, the first of the two hypostyle halls. What is rather rare in the older temples of Egypt is that the ceiling is still intact, but however blackened by smoke. It is supported by 12 columns with various capitals made up of flowers and palms. What was this room used for? We really do not know. Perhaps to establish a gradual passage from the world of men open to all winds and all light, to the world of the gods, to filtered brightness and limited access. As you walk into the temple, the ground rises and the ceiling lowers and the light decreases, so as to make the sanctuary a dark and mysterious place. The second hypostyle hall is smaller. It is still 14 meters deep and 20 meters wide. The reliefs on the wall relate all the stages of the construction of the temple, from the layout of the plan to its inauguration by Ptolemy XII. The construction of the temple lasted 180 years, and the 10 kings succeeded one another on the throne of Egypt. They are all Ptolemies, but there are several different kings on the temple walls. The second hypostyle hall communicates with several small rooms. To the east, the treasure rooms and the secondary entrance to the eastern staircase. To the west, the NILE chamber and the laboratory. The laboratory is also called the perfume chamber because the incense and ritual perfumes were prepared there. After the second hypostyle hall comes the room of the offerings. From there, a staircase leads to the terrace where the New Year ceremonies took place. The statues of Horus and Hathor, carried in procession, were displayed in a kiosk in the rays of the sun to recharge them with divine energy. We are now a few meters from the sanctuary where only the head priests and the pharaoh were allowed to enter. A black granite naos still occupies the center. It is considered to be the finest surviving naos of all time. There, a solid gold statue of Horus, adorned and scented, receiving an offering service 3 times a day, accompanied by music and prayers. The wooden rowboat used for carrying the statue during festivals is a replica of the original, which is on display at the Louvre in Paris. When we visited this temple, we were completely ignorant of its architecture, and after the sanctuary got a little lost in the maze of narrow corridors and small dark rooms. We spent very little time in these chapels, and I will be hard pressed to describe them to you in detail. I will therefore content myself with showing you a few pictures. We are in front of the Huabet, or Pure Room. It was here that for the New Year's feast, the boat of Horus was exhibited with huge food offerings placed in front of it. The goddess of the sky, Nut, decorates the ceiling. The sun moves between her arms and legs in 12 barks for the 12 hours of the day. We are now between the enclosure and the wall of the temple. The walls of the temple and the surrounding walls are entirely decorated with reliefs. Most feature the king making offerings to the gods. The inner facade of the western perimeter wall covers the battle of Horus against Set. In other words, of good against evil. Each year the priests celebrated the feast of the victory of Horus by piercing and cutting up effigies of Set, the hippopotamus, in wax and cake dough. This is the epilogue of the myth of Osiris, which I recount in detail in another video on this channel. Here is the outside facade of the same wall. First seen in the lower register, King Ptolemy leaves his palace. The following scenes in the register are dedicated to the foundation of the temple. The upper register and the middle register show scenes of offerings and worship to the gods. The north wall is remarkable for the symmetry of its decorations. 6 paintings, all showing a scene of offerings of King Ptolemy X and Queen Berenice III to the masters of the place. The figures are tall and must have impressed ancient visitors, just as they impressed us that day. We will end the tour with the Mamizi, which is located to the south of the pylon outside the temple itself. A Mamizi is a small chapel built near a major temple that was used for representations of the mysteries of the divine birth. Each year, the birth of the god's children was celebrated there. Thus, on the walls of the Mamizi appears images relating to the birth, breastfeeding, and education of the young god. This is Ai, the son of Hathor and Horus. It's time for us to get back to the boat, as another visit is scheduled this afternoon to the temple of Sobek in Komombo. We will still go up the Nile, that is to say descend towards the south for about 50 kilometers. I'll see you there in the next video.
أبو عمر.